How many seats are available there? Because one thing that I'm getting from our community is a lot of people would just like to attend to watch the proceedings, and and I'm talking anywhere from a few hundred to 1,000 people, or maybe even more. How many people can be accommodated?
Do you have a guess there, Representative Cavanagh?
Maybe 100 in the room, but I have been to committee meetings that they've opened up overflow rooms, with TV screens. I'm not sure there's any committee room that would hold more than 150, but they do want to accommodate everybody. So there'd be an overflow. You fill out a form if you want to talk, and the chairman makes every possible availability to actually talk, give your comments.
Let me ask you this: we recognize that your involvement, Representative Cavanagh, is to try to neutralize that. If you had it your way, you would not have necessarily endorsed or been part of, the suggestion of these bills. But this is the way it goes, and you're there to minimize. Is the rest of the Democratic Party therefore against? Are we going to find that they would be voting against these bills if they came out in their form now into the for vote out of the committee?
I could not make that blanket statement. It really hasn't been talked about as a caucus issue. We've had a lot of other things grasping our attention, but I know that my colleagues are going to pay close attention to this, but I'd hate to just give a blanket statement that everybody would be voting against it.
Right. But would they perceive it as it's been explained? I mean, is it clear, like the same challenges that you're dealing with, as I'm sure they're dealing with, whatever their issues, their committees they're on, that it's because of the balance of power right now, and I don't know, Bill Schuette probably doesn't have as much influence in their issues as he does in this issue that we're unfortunately confronting. But is that what you're finding?
Well, in my sense is that there's a whole lot of folks in the chamber on both sides of the aisle who saw the ballot measure pass overwhelmingly and don't want to stand in the way of people having access to, safe access to medical marijuana. I think that what's happening is that there's a lot of concerns and a lot of interest in clarifying the law and trying to tighten up what people see as loose ends. And my greatest fear is that is going to, be an opportunity for folks like Bill Schuette who really want to overturn what the voters did to get in there and frustrate folks, having legal and safe access.
But that being said, I don't necessarily think that'll happen because I can speak for this task force. We want to get it right, and we're not influenced by Schuette. We are warned that he may be influential in some votes, but I can tell you that Chairman Walsh and Rep. Horn absolutely realize that 2/3 of the state voted in favor of this. There is a true medical need, and that's their mindset. I'm not saying they're going to, be real liberal, but they want to protect the rights of medical patients, and I can say that because they've said that to me.
I've also heard that from a lot of my colleagues. I just think that, we just have to be vigilant. We need to make sure that we pay attention to the details, and as these bills come out, make sure there aren't opportunities for, judges or law enforcement officials who may want to be on a crusade or make a career out of making an example out of folks who are otherwise, law-abiding citizens. We need to make sure that those opportunities aren't there in the legislation, and just be vigilant about the details.
Where do you, Representative Cavanagh, where do you think the debate will start in the first judiciary hearings?
I would probably say with my bill, the clarification of the bona fide relationship. We have taken a lot of pains in making sure to be as inclusive as possible the various viewpoints. I've met with judges groups, law enforcement. We have the state police at the table. trying to loosen this up and get their buy-in along the process. Because a bill goes through a little easier if everybody's in agreement. But compromise, not everyone's going to be happy. I mean, that is the art of democracy. But hopefully, these bills will be acceptable. And if a good, as Jeff Irwin said, if there's some really good testimony, I know it moved my perception of marijuana. I heard person after person after person say that they have been able to give up opiates because of this. And I did not realize that beneficial use of marijuana. And I think that testimony will be very persuasive.
And as I mentioned last time, there's, Michigan Department of Community Health lists that statistic that 27% of Michigan households are treating with opiates for chronic pain. So when you look at the numbers of 133,000 compared to what, 27% of what 9 million people, it pales in comparison. And you see that is a method by which people are getting off of these addictive things. And again, that's a message that is not heard. And oftentimes the first line of attack is, 80% of the people on the registry are, with a wink, chronic pain. And that's just not fair. It's not fair. It's a low number. And I hope that, when those kind of things are said, and that's a law enforcement thing. And then as you speak here, I hear that they're the ones that need to be appeased in this to a certain degree. And I just hope that all of the honest truth is there, and that it's not just a, appeasement because they, don't like the law. They don't see it as, a shield instead of sword. I don't know. How do you stop that from happening? We're back to that question of how do you educate and change the mindset of 80-year fabric of society.
I think Representative Horn, Walsh, and myself are going to try to lay the groundwork that this is beneficial, and there's been a lot of discussion how to make this clarify the law in a fair way. And I hope. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I know, and it's something we keep going back to. And I know you're limited in where the conversation starts, but other than the not really implementing it, and not having the cards and the new condition hearings, the other issue is that by declaring that marijuana has medical value, the voters basically said that it's not scheduled like it's the federal, it's not scheduled as a dangerous drug. It has medical value by virtue of the voters. But yet, I don't think anyone in law enforcement thinks of it otherwise. And there's this problem that it still has this totally, and the view of how it's perceived in the law as the law exists right now, and all those marijuana charges, 4-year felonies and whatnot, they're all based on the premise that it is a, Schedule I controlled substance, because they mirror the federal scheduling of the Federal Controlled Substance Act. Michigan said no, and yet, law enforcement still treat it the same. How does that change? I know these bills are going to address some of these definitions, but I'm talking about.
Who do we complain to?
Yeah, I mean, it's nothing's going to happen, and even these bills, even if they're watered down, if there's no right to a trial.
They're still likely to be used to attack patients and caregivers.
Yeah, there's no protections. It's whittling away at whatever the law may have been. I don't know. How do we balance that out?
I go back to I'm trying to change the thinking from a law enforcement issue to a community health. And there's some ideas that I don't necessarily think I'm at liberty to just say now because they may not become part of the law, but we have been talking about, and I'm going to push for next week when we decide how we're going to roll this out. And it's to put the emphasis on the fact that this has medical purposes. The electorate has spoke. And I believe the police are overreaching. I don't have a definitive answer. I'm just going to try to change the culture. And even if we do make it a community health issue, the police have said, well, we're still not going to, back off for the person that has pounds and, is peddling to kids, and so there's always going to be that.
Good.
But they shouldn't back down. But the problem is the crossover. They look at us the same way as they look at that guy who's selling drugs to kids. And I talk to police a lot in my job, because my job is to get out in front of a possible problem and make sure that our folks aren't in harm's way if they want to open a capacity club or whatever. And in many cases, when I go and speak with the officers, the first thing out of their mouth is this for real? Does this really help people? I say, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've seen it over and over again. But the fact is there's no difference in their eyes. If you read the declaration section of the law, the voters were very clear that all arrests should be stopped involving medical marijuana.
Yeah,
it's right in the declaration, and that's what has to be enforced. It's not optional for the police to enforce what they like and disregard what they don't, and that's what we're up against right now. They are completely disregarding the law.
Let's take another caller. We're gonna have devil's advocate here, Tim Beck. Tim, welcome.
Thank you, Michael, so much. I mean, I really enjoy your show. I mean, you guys are just amazing in terms of bringing distinguished people like Representative Cavanagh and Walsh and Irwin and so on. This is just such a wonderful thing. Okay, I'm going to play the role, if it's okay, just devil's advocate of I'm going to repeat some things I've heard from certain Republicans, and I just want to ask, Representative Cavanagh and Irwin, if you choose to, respond. And what these Republicans say, well, there's just a lot of people out there that are abusing the law. Okay, this was really meant for people that are, terminally ill, life-end conditions. Maybe. There might be like AIDS, HIV, and so on, but this is really, again, an abuse of the process, and we really need to tighten it up and make it more difficult for not difficult, but I mean, again, to separate the sheep from the goats, and so to speak. I mean, how do you respond to that type of thing? I mean, have you ever heard this before? I mean, Representative Cavanagh or anybody else.
Go ahead, Phil. I mean, I'll fire out there. This is Jeff Irwin. I've heard this a lot, obviously, and I think there's a lot of different ways to respond to this. And, one is that the idea that there are a tremendous number of people on this registry who are abusing it is, I think, false, and there's really no data to back that up. Anything that comes out about that I've seen has all been anecdotal. And the question it raises in my mind is, why is the focus so great on the probably relatively few number of people who are abusing this opportunity versus the statistics we just heard a moment ago about the number of people who are abusing prescription drugs?
Mm-hmm.
Why is it that we're focusing so heavily on this? Is there a reason? And I think that when we start to unroll that, we find out that there's really not a lot of public safety reason to be kicking down any doors anywhere, or to be getting aggressive about this particular aspect of people bending the law to get away with a little something. So, that's one answer. And the other answer is that the number of people who are choosing to abuse the law in that way